what is the need and what is the importance of trade and transport? Say I ask you this question, what is the need and what is the importance of trade and transport? So the list that you will give me invariably will be around that it's important part of resources, maybe exploitation. It is the basis of development. Trade and transport are the basis of mobility. Trade, transport are the basis of regional development. Trade and transport are the basis of managing, say, interconnection between sectors, between regions. The trade centers, the transport hubs can act as growth poles. Okay. Anything else you want me to add here? I think more or less, this is what you will all say. Why do we need trade and transport? Okay, so we need for resource exploitation, we need it for development, we need it for mobility, for regional development. So this almost there. It helps us interconnectedness. There is sector and region linkages here. Growth pole hai. Some of you can talk about how it is important part of urban development. If you have seen, abhi aapka Delhi ka plan aaya hai. Okay, so you know about what is called as transport oriented development. So your transit oriented development, TOD ki baat ho rahi hai. You've heard about it, I'm sure. Yes, it's very important part of security also. Okay, it's important part of security, border management. Okay, border management. Am I good here, more or less? Okay, yes, growth pole hai. So they become the basis of a channel of spread for development, trade and transport both. All of these points are applicable for both, applicable for trade and also applicable for transport. Now see, the problem with this type of listing is there is some element of geography visible. Yahan bhi geography dikh raha hai, development geography hai, mobility geography hai, regional development bhi geography hai, interconnectedness geography, growth pole is geography, TOD is geography. But if I want something more specific, absolutely, you can add globalization here also. Okay, you can add globalization ka basis. Yes, definitely, it was trade and transport. But what I want is that this language likha hai aapne, this must convert into more specifics under geography. Agar aapne ye wala discussion, what I'll take up right now, if you can keep this discussion in mind, you will have a very good answer to write on. Okay? So I'm starting with this. These are the points you know, but see how I discuss those concepts here now. Then see if you can appreciate whether the write-ups could be more smarter in this line or not. Okay? And please keep writing as I keep discussing. Okay? Okay, now listen. So let me take up one by one and see transport here. So let me talk about this one first. Now, number one, see here, locations and spatial units and aerial units are not uniform. They are not uniform. Maybe for the theoretical aspects, if you look at the theories and the concepts, okay, from theoretical aspects, we can have assumptions of isotropic surface, but regions and locations, they vary on different elements. They vary on different elements of resources, and they vary in terms of various geographical advantage. Can I say this? The locations and space. Now, the moment I use the word location, the moment I use the word spatial unit, locations and spatial units and the aerial units are not uniform. Maybe if I'm looking at the theoretical aspects, assuming some kind of ideal conditions, okay, then we can have assumptions of isotropic surface. But reality mein, there is nothing called as isotropic surface, nothing called as uniform flat monotonous surface. Regions and locations vary on different elements. They vary in terms of resources and they vary in terms of geographical advantages. Okay, yes. So यहीं पर आएगा आपका trade and transport and connectivity. Connectivity and mobility are the consequence of such spatial or such aerial, okay, differentiation, such aerial variations. Does this look like geography now? And you know what? These kind of sentences can become the basis of introduction. They can become the basis of a conclusion also. So trade ho, transport ho, connectivity ho, mobility ho, they are the consequence of such spatial and aerial differentiation. See, none of this, what I'm talking about, none of this is something you do not know. आपको ये सब पता है. What I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to create some kind of geographically based discussions. So keep that in mind. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now I'm moving on to one point, okay? Next point here, that variations in aerial attributes include natural and physical barriers to mobility, So we're talking about mountains, we're talking about rivers, we are talking about forests. So again, trade and transport and mobility, okay, they try to overcome such physical barriers. So what is the importance of why should we have trade? Why should we have transport? Why should we have mobility? Okay, so two reasons. One reason is there is variations in terms of the attributes and the resources. Second is there are barriers. So our trade processes and our transport elements, they try to overcome the physical barriers. 2 points here. Go back to this point. How does it help us in development? How does it help us in regional development? How does it help us in interconnectedness? These are 2 points here. Okay, and such mobility is the basis of all development and investment flows. Such mobility is the basis of all development and investment flows. That's one point. Now look at the third point. The third point is any production system or any economy. Okay, now economy and production, these two are some of the most important basis of civilizations. So if you ask me, when did civilization start? When did we have the first civilization and what were the features of the first civilizations? The moment I say civilizations, there are settlements. When I say civilizations, there's some kind of power structure. And civilizations, when there are agriculture. Civilizations, when there is trade. Civilizations, when there is some kind of organized language and script. Okay. Civilizations, when there are market consumption centers, production centers. So I'm saying any production center or any economy, any production system or any economy that are the basis of civilization can exist and operate on trade and transport, okay, systems. Can operate because of trade and transport system. Because what we need is, we need connectedness between resources, production systems, distribution, and consumption. Okay, so when talking about any type of trade, in any type of economy, what we require is we require connectedness between what? Resource regions. We need connection between this and the production systems. The production systems, these are aided by labor, these are aided by technology, they are aided by investments, they're aided by innovations, distribution, and consumption. Now, the core of this is trade and transport. Trade and transport are at the core of this relationship. Resource regions with production systems aided by labor, technology, investments, and innovations. Okay, distribution, and finally, we have the consumption. To sustain this, what we require is we require trade, we require transport. Okay? Distribution and consumptions. We require trade, we require consumptions. Okay? So what happens is in time, space and elements of regions develop interconnectedness in the form of trade and transport networks. Okay, so those trade and transport networks, they kind of become elements of regional interconnectedness. Okay, they become the basis of how the space starts getting interrelated. In fact, therefore, we say that trade and transport networks, their densities, their efficiencies are the basis of development. So, I'm trying to explain how we can talk about the importance of trade and transport in a typical geographical language. So most of us had some of these points in mind. That trade and transport important क्यों है? Because development है, mobility है, regional development है, interconnectedness है, linked to growth pole, urban development, security, globalization. I'm trying to elaborate this in another set of language जहाँ की ये सारा दिख रहा है. So why do we say that trade and transport is the basis of development? Why? This is what I have come to, that we need trade, we need transport, and the networks, their densities, their efficiency, they become the basis of development. They become important measures of development. So analysis of trade networks, analysis of transport networks makes it easy for us to understand the levels and the quantum of development of a place. In fact, now if I move on from the discussion here, so if you remember, regional development and planning has two important components. Okay, one is what's called as vertical unity, and another is called as the horizontal unity. If you remember, there are other units also. There's an element of social participation, an element of environment, there's an element of financial viability. There's a whole list here. Two very important elements of regional planning, two very important elements, okay, that is part of regional development are vertical unity. This is more about intra-sectoral integration. So it's like, think of vertical unity like we prepare the food, we grow the food, we process the food, we package the food, we brand the food, we transport the food, and we sell the food. When I do this, this is called as vertical unification. Okay, I have mining of raw material. The raw material goes into processing. The processing creates iron ore. The iron converts into steel. The steel into products. Then you ship and you consume and sell it. So when I do that, that is called as vertical unification. So vertical unification is intra-sectoral integration. This is something like value chain integration. Excellent. This is something like your farm to fork integration. And what do I mean by horizontal unity? This basically means interconnectedness between regions. And both of this is possible only when we have trade and we have transport. So I've linked trade and transport to a very important element of regional planning and development. So when you write that trade and transport are important for development, don't stop there. Go one step ahead. The trade and development in what ways? So development in what ways? Because they become the elements of vertical unity. They become the elements of intra-sectoral integration. They become the basis of interconnectedness between regions or locations. That's where we need trade and transport. Guys, aapko samajh mein aa raha what I'm doing here? So I'm trying to work on your language in which you write your answers. In fact, the absence, the absence of this is the reason why we have problems related to island lack of development in islands or lack of development in the tribal regions. Because agar connectedness nahi hai, agar transportation nahi hai, those regions cannot have all these elements of development. Okay, so now go back to your first list here. Dekho, yahan mein likha tha na, regional development. How is it an element of regional development? How is it an element of development? How is it important for resource? So I've covered these points under these write-ups. So any question on trade and transport, this is the language you will try to use. Okay, I'll take you further on this. I've covered this idea of interconnectedness between sectors and regions. This is what is the vertical unity. This is what is the horizontal unity. This is what is your vertical supply chain integration also. So we have taken care of trade and transport in the language of regional development. So horizontal unity and vertical unity. And now see, if you remember in development, we had one more very important model called as Rostov's model. Can you tell me where does trade and transport come in Rostov's model? So in the stage wise, we say the preconditions of takeoff and the takeoff stage You remember when Rostov talked about the positive influence of the colonial powers. Okay, when Rostov talked about the positive influence of the colonial powers, what did he say? He talked about that the colonial powers were responsible for initiating the first elements of development, which were bringing telegraph, bringing the first railways, okay, the first proper organized roadways. So that is where we have the preconditions of takeoff. And the takeoff stage, the series of reforms where the private sector is trying to come out of the public sector dominance. Then we will have the drive towards maturity. So, the initial investments hai, which means the initial investments to kickstart development in the form of the first railways, the first telegraph, the first organized roads, okay, the beginnings of mercantile capitalism. This was based on trade and transport. Okay, so I'm linking the concept of trade and transport with, okay, the Rostov's model here. He might have used it to justify colonialism, but the fact is, if we did not have some of these, he might say that we did it. We'll say, no, if you were not there, we would have done it even better. So the British say that we were there to bring the first railways. Our answer is, अगर आप लोग नहीं होते तो हम railways और 20 साल पहले ले आते. If you were not there, I would have railways across the whole country. Why just Bombay and Thane? Why? Okay? So that's a different argument. The point is that these elements, the elements of railways, the elements of telegraph, the elements of roads, the element of mercantile capitalism, this tells us the importance of the trade and transport. This establishes the importance of trade and transport. In fact, if you know about this, if you look at the growth pole model, there are three things. There is the concept of multiplier effect. There is a concept of channels of distribution, and there is a concept of trickle and spread. Okay, trickle and spread. And of course, we have those growth poles. Okay, ये growth poles क्या हैं? Growth poles, these are the centers of industries and firms. These are the centers of economic activity. The multiplier effect, this requires trade and transport. The channels of distribution are nothing but trade and transport. The trickle and spread happens again because of trade and transport. So if you want to let the centers of innovation, centers of production, centers of economic activity spreading development through the channels, it's only possible when we have trade and transport. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm trying to establish the relevance of trade and transport as a concept to different models in geography. Okay, so growth pole model mein the importance of trade. So we have importance of trade transport under the Rostov's model in the conditions of takeoff and the preconditions of takeoff. Then I've related the concept of trade and transport to growth pole concept. Growth pole concept where we have the multiplier effect, the impact of one multiplying in the following sectors. Okay, that's only possible agar connectedness hai or agar trade hai. It's only possible that we can spread development through channels if we have trade and transport. So that's how we relate the concept of trade and transport with the growth pole concept. In fact, you can also apply this to the core periphery model. The core periphery model. Okay, the spread from the economic and from the trade core to the economic periphery and the setting up of intermediate centers. The setting up of intermediate centers. This is because of, again, trade and transport. So we had one major center. Okay, so there was another center. There was some kind of a link between two. Ye link kya hai? The link between two is essentially trade and transport. Trade and transport. And as the interaction keeps on building, we will have another intermediate center coming up here. Okay, ye jo linkages hai. So we have got another core here. The link of this core with this region and the development of intermediate center relationships they're established through trade and transport, So please recall what we know about the core periphery model one by one. Yes, the economies of scale se spread hota hai. The spread is through the channels. So the spread from core to periphery, and also the dependence of the core on the periphery. Both are the consequence of trade and transport. So trade and transport decides the spread of development under the growth pole model. Trade and transport decides the sequence of development through the takeoff and the conditions of the takeoff, preconditions of takeoff. The linkage between core and periphery, be it dependence, be it spread, again happens because of trade and transport. That's how I have linked trade and transport to concepts of development models and growth pole. Okay, so we have covered this, we covered this, mobility is also covered, and so on. Okay, now come to some other discussions here. Now see, point number 8. Classical models, the classical models of location theories were developed around the need for efficient organization of space. जो classical models थे, what models am I referring to? The classical models of location, कौन से models हैं? So we have got Weber's model, yes, industrial location model. We have von Thunen's model. We have Kristaller's center place model. Yes, correct. So these models were based around what? They're based around the need for efficient organization of space. So they were approximating the model under least transport cost assumptions. Remember, all of them were about what? Reducing the transport cost. Losch was a bit different. Losch talks about many other things also. But otherwise, these models were essentially around, how we can have least transport cost. There were approximations of the model under the least transport cost assumptions. So what this implies is that transport has been an important factor in industrial location, in agricultural land use pattern, and also in the organization of the settlement space लिख सकते हो आप लोग? The transport, therefore, is a decisive factor according to these models. Yes, they've talked about minimum distance, critical isodopane, yes, von Thunen's model, and so on. So they are based on the importance of transport as an important factor for industrial location, for agricultural land use pattern, and for organization of the settlement space. Right? And hence the concept of isodopanes aaya, isotims aaya, the whole idea where, a hexagonal, the concept of range, the maximum distance a person is willing to travel in the Kristaller's model. So all of that is around the consideration of transport. All of that around the consideration of transport. The last line is, I said, transport therefore has been an important factor. Transport has been an important factor in industrial location, in agriculture land use pattern, and in organization of the settlement space. Go on, let's go on first. Let's go on. Wait. Now see, number 9. Now see, according to E. Rogers and also according to Hagerstrand and E. Rogers, who gave us the concept of diffusion of innovation. And what they did was, basically what they're saying is that if this is an idea, a technology, some technology or some method, and if this has to spread, अगर ये diffuse होता है, अगर ये फैलता है, some idea, some technology, some innovation, some cultures maybe, some ways of life maybe, it has to spread. The spread is possible by what's called as contagion effect. This requires physical contact, face-to-face interactions. It requires contagion effect or face-to-face. There's something called as neighborhood effect. This is based on proximity. how close you are to something, proximity. And this is also because of hierarchy effect. Also because of hierarchy effect. Hierarchy effect matlab hai something at a higher, okay, say influence, and this starts impacting the ones lower down. Something more powerful starts impacting something lower down, like the administration telling us what to do, an influencer telling us what to do. Okay, maybe a very inspiring leader telling us what to do. So these are some of the three ways how ideas spread, how technology spread, culture spread, innovation spreads, the contagion effect. So I am face to face somebody, I tell him, do this. That is in terms of face to face. Concept given by Hagerstrand, and before him, it was E.M. Rogers who gave this concept, the concept of diffusion of innovation. And there is a graph that we talk about in terms of, like if you look at the speed and the effectiveness, speed and effectiveness of a diffusion of new ideas and innovation. So we have this graph. It's a pretty popular graph. It's called as the bell curve graph. Hai ye wala. Something like this. Something like this. On this side, we have percentage of population adopting the new ideas. On this side, we have time. So typically, ये कुछ ऐसे, okay, divide होता है, something like this. This group is called as the innovators. This group is called as early adopters. This is called as early majority. This is late majority, and this is what's called as laggards. Okay, so I'm linking. Okay, yes, this is innovators. These are the ones who innovators. This is early adopters. This is early majority adopters, late majority adopters, and laggards. So you guys probably come somewhere here, early adopters. Quickly you've adopted to the online technology. Okay, innovators who start the process. Maybe Baiju was an innovator. Of course, Edukemy would like to be known as innovator, but I do not know. I better not talk about it. I'll let you speak about it. Okay? Okay. So in the percentage mein kya hai? This is approximately around 2.5% of the people. This is around of all the adopters and the people. Then we have, this is around 13.5%. This is 34%. This is 34%. And this is 16% of the population. Okay. This is generally the pattern. The innovators, the early adopters, we have the early majority, the late majority, and laggard. Now, ये जो transition है, this transition is entirely based on how we are able to spread some ideas. ठीक है? Now, ये जो process है, ये जो shift है, this shift happens because of these three things. Okay, contagion effect. It happens because of the contagion effect. It happens because of neighborhood effect. It can happen because of hierarchy effect. How does it shift? Now, these require trade and transport. More importantly, transport and communication. It requires transport and communication. The graph ka name is Diffusion of Innovation Bell Graph. Diffusion of Innovation Graph. Hierarchy. Hierarchy is somebody more powerful, something more influential, something larger, inspiring the changes into something smaller. आप मेरा बात नहीं मानोगे, लेकिन शाहरुख खान का तो बात मानोगे, right? You will not listen to me, but if Katrina Kaif comes and tells you, आप पक्का सुनोगे. Example of hierarchy. अब मेरी मन की बात तो सुनोगे नहीं, बट कुछ कुछ मन की बात आपके दिल पे लग जाएगी, आप पक्का सुनोगे और ताली मारोगे, घंटी मारोगे, प्लेट बजाओगे, राइट? सो अच्छा हो बुरा हो, बाबा जी का बात सुन लोगे, ओके, कि आपको काढ़ा पीना है, ठीक है? दैट्स द एग्जांपल ऑफ हायरार्की, समथिंग मोर पावरफुल, something more influential, something that is more charismatic, that inspires adoption in some of the people. Contagion is face to face. Contagion is more in terms of physical, that requires transport, no? If I go to you and talk to you, that's contagion. You speaking to me directly is contagion effect. Neighborhood, jitna आसपास होगे उतना easy होगा adoption. So our point was, how do I bring in the significance of trade, transport, communication in this? And this is where you can establish the importance of ICT, importance of roads, importance of railways, importance of digital connectivity. Now, see, this online teaching ne kya kiya hai? Online teaching has removed the need for you to come physically to me. Okay, कि आप रोड में आओगे, ट्रेन में, कार में, बस में बैठ के आओ and come to offline centers. So it has increased. This is one type of communication, is one type of transport. The importance of the digital communication in the diffusion of innovation. Now you see geography, how trade and transport is related to diffusion of innovation. Trade and transport related to development, regional development, models of development, ICT, roads, railways, and digital communication. Now we come to the other aspects. So we have covered the aspects of development. We have covered the aspects of spread of ideas. Now we link it to security issues. How is trade and transport important for security? Okay, so now you have the example of Mackinder's model, Spikeman's model, the importance of Indian Ocean rim. Yeah, the Indian Ocean rim. This is powered by trade. Sea lines of communication. The importance of the choke point. This establishes the importance of transport. This establishes the importance of trade. And Mackinder and Spikeman, these are definitely around transport. The heartland का advantage था the ease with which you can move your forces within the heartland. Horsemen, cavalry, flat plains of the pivot region, that was part of Mackinder's idea. And Spikeman talked about relating all the coastal regions. This also is about ease of communication. The sea, the whole fight hai, sea versus the land. This actually is a fight of mobility. This is a fight of mobility. It's a fight of what can be moved faster across land or across water. Access to the ports, absolutely. So trade and transport, you also study from the perspective of security, perspective of, in fact, today's geopolitics. Agar aap today's emerging, we talk about emerging geopolitics. You understand the importance of Belt and Road Initiative. You understand the importance of the Silk Route. Okay. You understand the importance of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor or International North-South Transport Corridors. You understand the importance of Mekong-Ganga Plan. Mekong-Ganga Plan. So there is a geopolitical dimension that emphasizes the importance of transport. Okay, so now we talk about what we call as the port diplomacy. Very important today is what's called as the port diplomacy. Okay, the diplomacy around setting up of transshipment hubs. Transshipment hubs. The importance of, there is this place in Italy, Trieste, Trieste. Suna ye wala jagah? Not very far away from Venice. The Chinese investments here to develop a transshipment hub here, a major container port here. And what it is doing to change the face of geopolitics, right into the Mediterranean. Absolutely. The French trying, I mean, if you remember what happened with the coronavirus from China, the biggest impact was also in Italy. Remember Italy का impact शुरू हुआ था, it's like a contagion effect. Italy से इंडिया में भी आया है, Italy से सिंगापुर में भी गया है. So Italians have now, I mean, I should not be sounding racist here. Italians have been at the root of World War I and World War II in some way. और ये एकदम पार्टी बदलू हैं. Okay, कभी इधर कभी उधर. Okay, they are the global Mukul Roy. They can't decide. Should they be in TMC? Should they be in BJP? Okay, so our point is that transport hubs, port diplomacies, and transshipment hubs, these are the basis of the emerging geopolitics. They're the basis of emerging geopolitics. Okay? All good till here? Now let us go back and check our first list. Let us check our first list. Have I covered these points or not now? Batao. Importance of transport. I've touched on globalization, security, urban development, growth poles, interconnectedness between sector, regions, regional development, mobility, development, and resources. You can take up any of this write-up, okay, and make it your introduction, make it your conclusion, or even part of the body of some of the answers. Now see, I'm continuing. Geography has 4 elements of study. Geography has 4 elements of study. The study of the physical world, study of the social conditions, the study of the built environment, study of spatial patterns, and the spatial networks. I'm giving you one more way how you understand the study of trade and transport. Geography has 4 elements of study. The study of the physical world, this is environment, this is the physical geography. Study of the social conditions, this includes culture, it includes economic aspects, it includes populations, so on. The study of the built environment, industries, cities, infrastructure, and the study of spatial patterns and spatial networks. Spatial patterns and networks. Okay, this is about the spatial differentiation and the spatial linkages. आप बताओ, where does trade and transport come in more explicitly? The study of spatial patterns and spatial networks, the study of spatial differentiation and spatial linkages. So trade and transport are a very important part of this. I'm not saying इससे linked नहीं है, but this is an important part of linking trade and transport with geography. ठीक है? The built network, yes, the built environment, जिसमें कि आपका infrastructure आता है, and also the spatial networks, जिसमें कि you have your trade and transport के elements. So you're talking about trade. You talk about trade, you talk about ports. Talk about trade, you talk about markets. Talk about trade, you talk about warehousing. When you talk about transport, you again talk about ports. You talk about transport terminals. You talk about roads. You talk about railways. ये सारा इसमें भी आता है और linkage में भी आता है. So use any of these concepts as a part of your discussions on trade and transport. Okay? So we say trade and transport, therefore, trade and transport, therefore, are the basis of spatial order. They are the basis of spatial order. They define and they influence changing spatial patterns. Okay, they are the basis of spatial orders. They define and they influence changing spatial patterns. Now, I will change the question now. Okay? You know what I'll suggest? ये sentences को ना आप याद रख लेना, please. Okay? You remember the sentences. By heart those 1122 lines. Okay? So that, you know, you can use it, okay, आराम से across these answers.